Hello, I'm Kevin Church, and for the month of October 2020, we have Michael Kaltofen as our MUFIC Songwriter of the Month. How you doing, Michael?
I'm doing great, thank you. How are you?
I'm great. It's nice to finally meet you, and we're going to ask you a few questions, get to know you a little better.
Sounds good.
So, first question I have for you is, do you come from a musical family?
It's funny because I do and I don't. My dad was a lifelong wrestling coach. My brother was a phenomenal athlete, water skier. But on my mom's side of the family, there was a lot of musical influence. I have cousins who were professional musicians. I have one cousin, Mike Lindner, who actually was with the Caledonia Blues Band, played in Spain for years.
Wow.
Those guys played a lot of blues, which wasn't really what I was into.
Right.
So I never really was part of the musical circle that was going on in my family. But my brother was a phenomenal drummer. Played for years around the Chicago area after he got out of college. But myself, I played saxophone. I played saxophone because I thought it looked cool. So when they were walking around school and we had the opportunity to play. And that was the whole thing about my family, because we're talking about the family influence. Well, my mom was, she wanted us to know an instrument.
Okay.
So we had a piano in the house that, of course, was my brother's piano, right? That my grandfather bought him. And then I was, she was real supportive. So I pick, of course, the second most expensive school instrument. The French horn was the most expensive, right?
Right.
So I picked the second most expensive one.
Okay.
And then, and I played alto sax for years through junior high. So the musical influences were there as far as support went, but not when it came to playing the guitar. When it came to playing the guitar, my cousins had that all locked up. They were a very musical family. All three of the boys ended up being professional musicians at different points in their lives. My cousin John played all the ski hills in Colorado and was hugely popular, in a couple different variations. I think he struggled a little bit as a songwriter, but man, could those guys play. Mike was just phenomenal, and I never appreciated my cousin Mike until I was an adult. I wasn't into the same kind of music that they were into. I was more into hair bands, and I use that term in reference to how people acknowledge it. These were metal bands, and they were good.
Right.
They were good bands, and, but they never, you couldn't recreate that in the environment that I lived in. So, I feel like I was, I don't know, I was born in the wrong time, in the wrong place. And I feel that, what I played, just what I wrote and what I played just didn't translate to what people were into or what was going on at the time. And now, so much of what I wrote back, right at the time I got out of high school, it seems much more relevant now in the current climate where the singer-songwriter, especially around here.
Right.
Coming from Chicago, where, you were loaded with professional musicians, but trying to find somebody to play with is another story. I can't tell you, how many times I went to interview drummers and musicians to be in my band. I tried to put together 5 or 6 bands, never once accomplished it. Had a great bass player, Vito. And Vito and I would get together and play, and I would go try to get. You show up to a drummer's house to, and I'm used to my brother. Again, the family influence.
Right.
My brother gets out of college, and he just decides I'm going to be a musician, and he had the talent to do it. His band was just insanely good. They were one of the most popular bands in the Chicago area. And we had some hair bands that came out of the time period before that, out of Blue Island and everything, which is a Chicago suburb. But he was just so good, and it was intimidating. And when he would bring his drum set, you know, down, I say down because he locked himself up in the attic for a year playing.
Wow.
To get ready to go. And then he packed up his stuff and he went to Colorado and played with another one of my cousins, Brooks. And they played in a band called Uncle Frog in Colorado, in Boulder. And I mean, they were real popular in the Boulder area, and that's such a hippie commune area, you know. He went from being this, you know, one of the best wrestlers in the country to all of a sudden he's playing in a hippie commune. And so he's looking at me saying, oh, Mike, I get it now. I get why you love music and, you know, what your whole thing is. Because my whole thing was, you know, anything I could do to not have to play sports.
Right.
You know, I had, you know, that going on in my family. So you had to be a 3-sport athlete in my family. You know, that's how that was. I remember when we were young, chasing fireflies in the moonlight. We laughed and we tumbled and we tumbled and we laughed. We never worried about what it all means. When we laughed and we ran and laughed in the moonlight. When we laughed and ran in the moonlight. We never look back, never look back, never look back at our shadows. Never looking back, never look back at our shadows. And I remember so long ago, chasing frogs and turds where the road ends. It was our wonderland and wild and we roamed. We never worried about the future, never worried. When we ran and laughed in the moonlight. When we ran and laughed in the moonlight. We never looked back, never looked back, never looked back at our shadows. We never looking back, we never looked back at our world changed us, and you know we let it change. And all I do is smile, all I do is smile when I think about those days when we laughed and we ran and laughed in the moonlight. When we ran and laughed, we ran and we laughed, we ran and laughed in the moonlight. We never look back, never look back, never look back at our shadows. Never look back, never look back, never look back at our shadows. Never look back at your shadow. Never look back at your. But yeah, the family had a lot of influence on me playing music. My mom bought me my first acoustic for my 17th birthday and bought me lessons.
I was getting ready to ask when you started playing guitar.
Yeah, and that was, I mean, I garbage picked guitars. People would throw away guitars back then. I mean, I don't even know. I'm pretty sure that my first guitar was a Martin. And I cut it in half, cut the back body off of it to make it thin. And then I took athletic tape, which was always readily available in my house, my dad being a wrestling coach and a trainer. And, you know, I made it into a thin body electric, you know. But you could only put one or two strings on it because nobody knew how to tighten the headstocks and the tuning pegs on those.
Sure.
You know, so nobody knew anything. You know, you couldn't get music. I mean, it's not like today where I can just go online and, you know, type in a Led Zeppelin song or, you know, Rolling Stones songs and get the 3-chord version of it.
Right.
You know, you had to go to a music store. You had to spend $28, you know, to buy a book, or $7.95 for Billy Joel's A Piano Man, or, you know, we just didn't have that money. You know, it was, you know, I didn't have $10 to go spend on a music book. You know, I'd try to sit in the store and steal the idea of how it was played.
Sure.
And get home and remember, okay, so it was AEG, okay, and try to put it together that way. So most of my writing is much more, and this is why I struggle to play with other musicians. I hear something different in the melody. I hear something different that I write my lyrics to than just the 3 chords or the 5 chords or whatever it is that you're playing. I hear something different in there, and that's how I write my music. And I haven't found a drummer yet except my brother. I haven't found, you know, the 2 bass players in my life, you know, Kevin Ryan and Vito Masadi. Those are the only 2 guys who ever understood me musically.
Are they still around? I mean, talk to them at all? Ever?
No, Kevin was my brother's bass player.
Okay.
So when those guys, I was always amazed when I played with, you know, what I call real musicians.
Right.
You know, air quotes and everything. These guys were real musicians. Man, you know, they made you sound amazing. that rhythm section.
Right.
Those guys were tight. I mean, they would play together. You know, the singer wouldn't show up. The lead guitarist would be off doing whatever he felt like doing. But man, I'll tell you, the bass player and the drummer would show up. And they would lay it down for hours and hours and hours and hours. And maybe the rest of the band never showed up. I'd never seen anybody as dedicated as a musician as I saw my brother was. And that was the dedication that made him a great athlete. And it's a dedication I never had. You know, and so And you know, at least one of my cousins had that dedication too, and that's why he was able to put together, you know, the Caledonia Blues Band. And you know, he was one of the greatest blues players I've ever heard in my life. I mean,
Wow.
And I'm talking, we came from Chicago, Chess Records, and the whole deal. You
Right,
know.
exactly.
Everybody who was anybody who wasn't in the Delta came out of Chicago, and even those guys from Mississippi and everything, they went to Chicago to record and play.
Exactly.
So it was the blues heartland, and maybe that's why I didn't like it. Maybe that's what was crammed down my throat all those
Right.
years. But yeah,
Seemed cheesy to you.
yeah, it did.
And superficial kind
You know,
of thing, even though it's not.
And when we got together at family functions, and you know, and I'm not saying they excluded me, although I did feel very excluded from it. You know, that I wasn't part of their group, their group of musicians. Nobody ever asked me to jump in really and play along. But Steve, we were dragging his drum set all over the place. My brother Steve, you know. So again, the favorite son, you know. And but that's okay though, because he's, you know, he's my best friend, you know, and we got along great. And he always, as an adult, respected me musically. He always respected what I did, and he was a good songwriter too. He was a good lyricist, a good poet. And, you know, he just kind of pushed that to the wayside. And I, you know, that's the one thing I wish that he had kept up on, you know, was writing his lyrics and his poetry and everything. But I sort of just took front and center on that. But, you know, I didn't know the lyrics to Sweet Home Chicago. I didn't know, you know, Neil Young. And I mean, I didn't get Neil Young. I didn't get those bands. I like the Eagles a lot, but you know, that's not what these guys were into. So if you were a drummer, you could sit in and play with them. But as a singer-songwriter, it was real difficult to find a seat at the table in my family. So the influence was there, but not the support.
Okay. Wow. So some of your first influences you mentioned were hair bands, things like that.
Yeah, but, you know,
Metal or
that was when I was a kid. We got into Black Sabbath,
yeah.
you know, and even, I mean, at that time when I was getting into it, my favorite band of all time is Aerosmith.
Okay.
I mean, you know, that says a lot right there.
That's a lot of different sounds, different, you know, you got so many different influences in Aerosmith. You got the Sabbath.
Absolutely.
You got the Sabbath, you got the blues, you got...
Well, they were the poor man's Rolling Stones,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And
so you have all that morphed into one. I can see how that could be your favorite.
they were just, there was something about Aerosmith that really hit home with me.
Right.
But now that being said, I have to say this because I have to pick an American band.
Right.
You know, I'm from America. I'm American. You know, I mean,
You must pick an American band.
That's right. I mean, I managed to trace my ancestry to the UK.
So glad you didn't
So,
choose America.
You know,
That's a Canadian-
right, or Kansas. You know, but I had, but Aerosmith. Here's where Aerosmith comes in. So my sister, you know, I'll never forget how I felt looking at that Black Sabbath album with Ozzy Osbourne on the cover, standing in front of this creepy house, and it looked like the devil. She had that album, you know, the Black Sabbath album, and she had that in her record collection. But what she also had was Aerosmith Greatest Hits. She had Toys in the Attic.
Okay.
Toys in the Attic, I grabbed out of her collection. First of all, the cover was intriguing to me as a small child. You know, I think
Sure.
it's 9 or 10. My sister Kelly and I always had Aerosmith in common. In fact, you know, I bought her an Aerosmith album. I bought her, you know, one of their greatest hits albums later on. But Aerosmith was, you know, they were my favorite band because I sat there night after night in northern Wisconsin. I spent my summers in northern Wisconsin. I was on a water ski team. We spent our days water skiing. I mean, we all had to have jobs, of course, because, you know, my dad was, you know, you're 12, I don't care. You're going to work at a restaurant as a kid and scrape grease off the floor and earn $2.25 an hour, you know. But I used to drive a little fishing boat over there. And that was our, you know, but we also, on the other side of that, learning a work ethic, we got to water ski all day. And he would drive the boat endless, countless hours, you know. My brother was 4-time state Wisconsin barefoot championship, you know, champion. And he was one of the greatest skiers that I ever knew.
Wow.
You hear I have a lot of respect and love for my brother. You know, he accomplished a lot
For
of
your
great
family
things.
in general.
Yeah,
The way you keep talking about them.
my family was amazing. They
Right.
really were. I was adopted, and
Okay.
I always knew it. And it was interesting when I actually found my birth parents that, you know, my birth grandmother was a music teacher,
Oh, wow. Okay, so now this is making a lot of sense.
which blew my mind. And I found him on
It's
Ancestry.
in your blood then, huh?
I found him on Ancestry. Never went looking for him actively, but I found him.
That
It
is
was all
so cool.
accidental, but, you know, and that's a whole other story for an
Sure.
Ancestry.com.
Yeah.
You know,
Maybe we'll do that one day.
ad,
Just
but,
talk about that.
yeah, you know, but that was where I found out a lot of, you know, things that felt like home to me. So what's interesting is they're from Connecticut.
Okay.
So you got the Aerosmith connection right there. I always felt
wow.
camaraderie with the East Coast. Never felt California was my place.
Okay.
And you just, you know, that's what I'm saying, you know, where you feel like you were just born in the wrong place in the wrong time. And I don't want to say to the wrong people, because my parents, who will always be my parents, loved me more than anyone on this planet. You know, my mom passed away, you know, quite a few years ago, and I miss her every day.
Wow.
You know, and, you know, my sister is amazing. You know, her husband, who I've known my whole life, Frank, he's just these are amazing people that I spent my life with, people to be admired. You know, my dad was one of the hardest working men I've ever met in my life. He built his cabin in northern Wisconsin, you know, with his bare hands.
Oh, wow.
The only thing
That's
he didn't lay
incredible.
was the foundation and the fireplace. But I do remember him collecting rocks for that fireplace.
Yeah.
Big stones. You know, I remember that. And, you know, in 74, he built that place. But all of that goes into the type of music I play, which is Americana.
Elaborate on Americana.
So
For you,
Americana,
what that means to you.
I was very honored that Mary Reagan wrote an article in the journal Scene, and you know, the big title is "Kaltofen Brings Americana to Somerville."
Nice.
And I was so honored.
Yeah, congratulations.
To
That's
have
pretty cool.
That kind of thing put on me.
Absolutely.
Because I play songs that are about the human experience. And I'm not talking about heartbreak and things like that. You know, I play very, very little of what I play is about me, but it's always about the people around me and the life that I see and the world that I live in.
Right.
And I don't get very political. You know, I don't get very religious. You know, but I do have a song that I've recently written about, you know, can you hear me, God? And, you know, it's kind of funny because at the time I was writing it, I thought of the Judy Blume books, you know, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And, you know, those were the books that were real popular when I was a kid. And my mom used to get me those. But Americana to me is about the experience, and, you know, it's not about blame. It's about what the experience is. There's
Right.
a lot of people are out there whining about stuff.
Right, no.
Which I respect, and I say
Right.
whining, and that sounds disrespectful. And, you know, for people that know me, they know that I don't mean that in a disrespectful way.
No.
It's just a different way. You know,
It's
you
a
know,
different
I would
observation.
use the you know, complaining idea, you know,
Sure.
and the B word and all of that, you know, out there complaining about stuff. But it's not really what I do. I talk about the human experience, you know, what it was to be a man, you know, and
Right.
how, you know, I always joke that, you know, I'm not really a man. I don't take my woman in hand. I don't make more money than my wife. You know, I don't spank my children. I don't fight. I don't drink alcohol and go to bars and, you know, have that and not that any one of those things in and of itself, you know, makes you a man. But, you know, for me, being a man is someone who is there for my family. It's someone who is experiencing this world in the right way. And for me, the right way to experience is to live my life the way that I see fit, that doesn't hurt people. And I don't take strong political stances on things because, you know, my life's not set up that way. If I spent my life taking strong political stances on things, then I wouldn't have any friends. I wouldn't have anyone to love.
Right.
I mean, and I mean that for real.
Yeah.
You know, people who spend their time, you know, who want to go and live that kind of a life. I respect that. I respect anybody who believes in something. You know, you know, but I am someone, and this goes to the man thing. I'm someone who you can turn me around on something. You just explain it to me.
I got you. Instead of you being dead set in your ways,
Oh,
or
forget that.
or already judged, you've already decided this is how it's going to be. You
Right.
can't change my mind.
Right.
Or
And
change my
that's-
mind. I dare you to change my mind, and
Right.
that means you're not going to, right? But,
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, you can turn me around on something. I'm not so stubborn, and that comes out in my songwriting. I'm not. You know, I admit my faults.
Right.
And I admit the faults of those I see in people. And some people, you know, they, you know, I have a song about, you know, slavery in the South. You know, about the Southern trains. And the Southern trains weren't on railroad tracks, man. You know, the Southern trains were you know, the Underground Railroad, you know, getting people out. You know, and that's a difficult song to play in some environments.
Sure.
I still play it though, because that's how I feel, and it's really not disrespectful. It's a story. It's a story about it, and it's not saying the South is bad. I love the South. I moved here. Nobody said you have to move to South Carolina. You know, and that's something that I always talk to people about. I hear people all the time. They want to complain about this and they want to complain about that because they live here.
Right.
And I tell them, why'd you move here then? Go somewhere else.
Right.
You know, I packed up my bags. I moved from Chicago, Illinois, and I moved to South Carolina after getting 2.5 feet of snow in one day, breaking my back out there. And my wife's family's been out here for a while. And I ended up here because I just, one day my neighbor looked at me and he said, "Don't you have family in South Carolina?" I said, "You know, I do." And he said, "Doesn't your wife want to move there?" And I said, "She does." And I came in on that February day and we were gone in July. It was right at the time before my son was starting, you know, going into, you know, second grade, and really at that point where you're going to make those friends that are going to last you the rest of your life. And I didn't want him to think of Chicago as his home.
Okay.
So we made the decision. We were gone months later, packed up. You know, the feeling driving across the country with everything I own in the back of this truck that I could just pull over at any time because I drove it myself because I have that license. But I remember driving through Tennessee and looking at the mountains, and you're going and you're above these valleys.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought I could just pull in right here, unpack my life, and live the rest of my life right here.
I can see that in Tennessee. It's absolutely gorgeous, right. Especially on 40 when you're rolling through.
Yep.
It's so pretty.
And those things come into my music too. And a drive like that is an experience for me. You know, I had to spend a month driving to Charlotte, and for my job, I worked in North Charleston at the call center, and I was a manager there. And that was when I quit management forever. And that was where a lot of my arguments about the South came from, where I was like, well, why'd you move here then? You're going to sit in this room full of people and complain about living here. Well, 80% of this people were born and raised here. You know, these people in this room are,
right.
You know, they're native. And I love them for everything, you know. You know, one of my biggest things was going through a drive-through. I've never experienced anything like that before. Going through a drive-through where they weren't throwing the food at you. You know, and you know, they standing in line and talking to, you know, these are the experiences, you know, standing in line. This place calmed me down to where I sat back and I said, you know, I'm going to play music. I met Dan Riley.
Oh, man. Yeah, Dan's great.
I sat back and, you know, I moved here and I, you know, put together my own CD and everything, you know, and you can hear it at Michael Kaltofen Music, you know, Kaltofen, Michael Kaltofen Music on YouTube. It's my first album called 43. And you can go there and listen to it. And I'm sorry, it's called 47. I was thinking the movie 43 I just seen, but you go and listen to my music and you know, that sort of thing. But I met Dan, and The South calmed me down so much that I stopped being concerned with anything musically. I stopped worrying. I said, and I always played, but as far as putting a band together, I finally had this place where I could just go and play by myself.
Right.
And do my own thing.
Right.
And that was when everything opened up for me. And then, of course, I met Josh Charmaine. And, Josh booked me at Coastal Coffee Roasters. One thing I could do is I could bring in my people.
That's great.
A homegrown brew house.
Yeah.
I don't think those guys like me there. I don't know. I don't think the guys that work the bar there like me. But, I bring in 12, 15 people was more than I saw any other musicians bringing into that place. So I was pretty excited. I had some really good experiences playing there. Never really got invited back, but, play my own material, play a little bit of covers. But, I can do, full hour and a half, 2 hour sets of just my own material.
That's great.
But that being said, sometimes they want to hear turn the page, and sometimes, I'm a kind of a Zeppelin guy, so I'll throw in some, Babe, I'm going to leave you, and some of my staples, Ramble On and things like that. But, there's been a lot of great things musically in my life and a lot of great experiences. I've been around very successful people. I'd mentioned my brother-in-law, Frank, very successful businessman. Kind of epitomized what I always had hoped for until I realized I'm not that guy. I'm not that guy. I wasn't blessed with this amazing memory. Recall is, seems to be one of the things that, really successful people have in common. They were able to do really well in school and have the appearance of being very personable because they can remember people's names and everything. And I've always struggled with that. My song lyrics, my writing, it's not dark, it's not light, but it's honest.
So how honest are we getting today with today's song?
So today the song that I'm going to play is a song called Moonlight. I actually wrote it in a G tuning, open G. I like open G because especially I play the 12 string almost exclusively. Now here's the problem. So with the 12 string, it's really hard to tune down to like an open G and then tune back to an open E. First of all, my high G string on it, I actually use a 27 where you typically use like a 17 on that because I break it. I break it so often tuning that one G string. So I look it up. I go online. I'm looking up. I'm like, how do I stop? I've got excellent, an excellent bridge, an excellent nut, and I'm breaking strings, And I found that tuning and detuning your guitar is going to break them. So I typically, when I play at a gig, I have a guitar that I got. My friend Caleb had passed away at 27 years old, and his mom, he was one of my musical buddies. He was much more than that. He stood up in my wedding and everything. He's from northern Wisconsin. He was my summertime friend, right? I would leave for the school year, come back, and boom, we would pick up from right where we left off.
Nice.
Inseparable for the summers. And that's just the kind of guy we were, He always liked me to drive the boat for him because he seemed to always really perform well. He was another ski show guy. My brother will say he was the best skier he ever knew.
Wow.
And my brother was the best skier I ever knew.
Exactly.
So Caleb was, was amazing. But yeah, he bought a guitar when he was, probably 19, 20, something like that. So I taught him how to play it a little bit. But when he passed away, I was really honored that, they gave me his Alvarez, with the promise that I'd never sell it,
Right.
And that's a funny thing because, I'm not a big, sell my stuff guy. But, that's my go-to six string, although now I have to get it refretted.
Right.
But, I typically will have that tuned to G, and then I'll have my 12 string tuned to E. So it's kind of one of those funny things so I can switch guitars when I'm playing.
Correct, yeah.
And then it also affords me the opportunity. I'm a string breaker. I don't know what to say about that. I can't tell you how many strings I break. It's at the point where it's almost a joke. It's a running gag that I know that when I'm tuning, I'm going to break a string. I mean, you know, my guitar is tuned to G right now, my 12 string, and
Right.
it's been tuned to G for, you know, a few days now.
I got you.
And I've tuned it back to E a couple of times because, you know, when I practice, I like to move it around. But for as great as G is, because my favorite gig that I play, it's a monthly gig. I play it at Main Street Reads in downtown Somerville. It's an independent bookstore. It's so cool because not only is it an amazing bookstore, it's got all these independent authors, and they come in and do book signings on third Thursdays.
Oh,
And
very
they
cool.
do it on Saturdays, and you know they run book reading groups and everything there. The people are just amazing, and I started coming in and laying down background music to them, telling the stories of how they wrote their books,
Oh, how cool is that?
and they're answering questions, and I'm increasing my volume and decreasing, and I'm changing what I'm playing.
Sure.
And it was such an amazing experience. That is absolutely my favorite gig. I mean, I love the Porch Jam. Dan Riley presents it.
Right.
This is a joke.
Oh, yeah.
Dan Riley presents a Dan Riley production featuring Dan Riley. That's my joke for Dan. I love Dan. You got to know, I love Dan. And the Porch Jam, I have played in more Porch Jams possibly than even Dan has, because he's missed 2 of them. For doing other gigs. I've only missed 1, but I love the Porch Jam. That's my thing, but it's a different type of experience. Playing for 2 hours with my 12-string guitar and trying to set the ambience of this amazing bookstore. That's my favorite. I miss it. I haven't done it since February. You know,
Right.
February is the last time I've played live anywhere. And, you know, I have a lot of mixed emotions with that because, you know, I'm fortunate. You know, and this kind of goes to the man thing, but I have a wife who makes a very good living. She still makes her Chicago money in South Carolina.
Okay.
You know, she's a you know, litigation consultant artist for a firm that does exhibits for trials, high profile stuff. And so because of that, I am afforded to be able to, I quit management, quit my job, walked away from it, and I work in benefits for a company out of Colorado now. And that allowed me to expand and play more music and do that.
Right.
So the rule in my house is you got to make enough money you got to have benefits. She can't afford to put me on her insurance benefits because, you know, as great as, you know, the Affordable Care Act is and everything, and, you know, and I'm not going to get into a disagreement or an argument about whether or not that's great.
Right.
The bottom line is that she can't afford to put me on her benefits if I can be gainfully employed. I can't afford to go on the Affordable Care Act because of how much money she makes. So I have to have a job and I have to have benefits. And my job has been amazing with allowing me. I'm off work right now
Yeah.
to come here and do this interview, you know, and they were very excited for me to be able to do this because they're very supportive. You know, we all work out of the house. And so,
Right.
you know, I've been very lucky, and I struggle with my music friends out there who, you know, and I have a ton of respect for them who work and make a living and do this. And they run open mic nights and they play every gig they can because they have to.
Yeah.
They'll play 2-3 gigs a day. They'll play an afternoon gig on Saturday. Then they'll do something free with Dan, you know, at the Porch Jam because, you know, we don't get paid for that. You know, I played at the Edisto Blackwater Boogie, which was the greatest event I've ever played in my life. And, you know, I showed up on Friday and one of our guys, you know, couldn't get there. You know, another local artist who I love, Matthew Chrisman, you know, he couldn't get there. He didn't have a ride.
Right.
And so Josh and Dan come to me, you know, and they're like, hey, man, can you play? You know, we got a 30-minute spot. And I was just there watching, getting a feel for the place.
Oh,
you know,
no.
my spot was the next day. And I said, well, geez, I don't have my guitar. I don't. And Josh was like, listen, man, if I can get you a guitar, can you play? I'm like,
Right.
let's go.
We need somebody
Let's
now.
go,
Yes.
And so I played that night, and then I played Saturday the next day, and it was really nice because I was able to really help out and kind of run the singer-songwriter stage, which was great because those guys were dealing with the main stage and the second stage, and then the singer-songwriter stage was kind of in a different spot. So, the Autostow event, and, it had to get canceled this year. I was looking forward to it. It was like...
It'll be back around, though. Dan's fantastic. Matthew and Josh have all been on our show. If you watch previous episodes,
Yeah.
You'll see their interviews, too.
Yeah, I mean,
fantastic.
Josh was a huge influence for me. I mean, even with the song I'm going to play today, Moonlight, his playing style, the way he moves around, at the end of the Autostow, Dan walked up, and it was Saturday night. Things were wrapping up. He said, "You know what, man? In the year you've been playing, for me and with me, and he said you get most improved musician, and it's because those guys opened it up for me. Like I started to understand things I didn't understand before,
right?
About being able to play." And one of the people, it was Dave Matthews. When Dave Matthews appeared on the scene, I wanted to quit the guitar. I didn't understand it. This guy was doing things that I never understood. You go back to influences. Led Zeppelin is a huge influence of mine. The only reason that I even know about the key of G is from the song "That's the Way" from Led Zeppelin. That delicate, beautiful balance. I don't want to say that I write like Led Zeppelin because that's insane. But influence-wise, I write like "That's the Way." I mean, that song in and of itself, I mean, people think it's cheesy. People maybe, they don't like anything but "Whole Lotta Love" maybe, or "Black Dog" from Led Zeppelin, They like to just get their ears blown off.
Right.
But the delicate things that Robert Plant and Jimmy Page did were amazing. I was always, the Beatles Stones argument. I was Beatles up until a few years ago, and I saw the movie Crossfire Hurricane, and I'm like, whoa, man, these guys, and then I always had, the Stones' greatest hits. Everybody did. Through the Years Darkly was one of my favorite albums of all time, and that has, She's a Rainbow on it, and that has, Give Me Shelter on it, and that has all those Rolling Stone songs
right.
that were, and again, it's Through the Years Darkly because it explored their psychedelic past. I mean, that's what the album was, and I never really got, Midnight Rambler, to be honest with you. That, was a little bit cheesy for me. But again, now you're talking about getting straight and blues again.
Yeah, that was bluesy. That's your
Um,
Chicago roots right there.
Yeah.
I can see why you didn't like it.
But yet, then Aerosmith, I mean, they're rooted in the blues. I mean, Joe Perry is firmly rooted in the blues.
Right.
But alternate tunings, though, were such a weird thing to come in for me because I didn't even know they existed. You couldn't just go to, like I said, a music store and afford to actually buy that stuff. When I was a kid, and now I'm going back to walking uphill in the snow both ways to school type of thing.
Right.
But nobody knew how to play anything. Everything was played wrong. One of my favorite things in Guitar World magazine is, you've probably been playing this wrong article, and they talk about, Smoke on the Water and those kind of songs where you learned them by listening and by trying to recreate those on two strings on your guitar. Maybe using, what we used to call a power chord or something.
Sure.
And then you see the written out music for it, and you're like, what? And then you listen to it again, and you realize there are these overdub parts, or there are these second parts, or, there's things Richie Blackmore was doing that
right.
you didn't even know you were listening to because all you heard, like for me, all I hear is the melody. I'm a little tone deaf to the intricacies of what's going on. The album that had the most influence on me ever in my life came from my aunt. My aunt was an editor for Time magazine, and she passed away my senior year, and I ended up, all her records ended up in my house, and then they ended up in my room, you know, and there was Janis Joplin in those groups, and it was Masters of the Guitar Volume 1. I'd never been able to find it again, and I think that's what it was called. You know, you're talking 20-something years ago, and I put that thing on. I'll tell you, I don't know if there was one guitarist or 10. I don't know what was going on. And these guys were playing classical guitar, or this guy, I don't even know who they are or what they were, but
Blew your mind.
it was more than I could handle. It really was. I had to sit back for a minute. I couldn't even touch my guitar for days after that because it was embarrassing to me. And all by myself in my own room. You know, I've never been one of those guys to sit down and be able to pick out a song and play it by ear. I've always been jealous of those guys. You know, I've always been jealous of the guys that could shred. You know, shredding is what the hair bands did, and I could never do that. I never understood that. I couldn't hear that. I didn't understand that. I didn't understand those things. I didn't understand, growing up, I didn't understand things like, you know, a play in football. You know, I didn't understand that. I didn't understand thinking 3 moves ahead in a wrestling match. That's what the greats did, you know, and that translates directly to music.
Yes.
I didn't
really
understand
does.
how to put, you know, chord progressions together. So what I play is what I play, and it's how I feel, and it's what I do. And, you know, I have my fans. I have, Ed and Chrissy Crossman are 2 of my biggest fans, and they're neighbors of mine who show up at everything I play, you know. Sandy Brunbridge and you know, Sean Cadrick is, you know, my de facto manager. You know, they're at every gig I play. They have been my biggest supporters outside of my wife, Karen, you know, and my family in South Carolina, you know. They've just been phenomenally supportive of everything I do. And, you know, right now my Illinois family, they don't even know that I play, you know, because that's not who I was when they knew me. It's, you know, they know through Facebook and everything, obviously, but what I'm saying is there hasn't been a lot of, they haven't been able to see a lot of what I've done. And, you know, a few years ago, I was able to, you know, to give them my album that I had done, my disc that I had done. And that was pretty neat for me, you know. And my whole thing was, I felt desperate to get something down to, you know, have some record that I walked this planet and I played music.
It's wild.
Yeah.
That is so cool. So today when we do, well, I'm not doing it. You're going to play solo today.
Yeah.
Do your thing. So Moonlight, what's the story behind that?
So, like a lot of my songs, Moonlight is about loss. But it's about a loss that is not necessarily, it's an unknown loss, you know. It's actually about a temporary friend. It's about someone that you spent time with, someone that you knew, you know. I don't have any friends from high school that I really keep in contact with, maybe 1 or 2 online. You know, I was part of a huge group, and, you know, and some of them are still, you know, the same people they were, and the ones that changed are the ones that I'm still friends with. I mean, I'll be honest with you, the ones who, you know, were able to grow and change with this world, the ones who still think it's high school, I'm just not friends with those people online, you know.
Yeah, I understand that.
But, you know, I always joke that, you know, it's about that one-time friend you had, and you had that friend for just a minute, and in that moment, they were your best friend. Maybe it was someone that you spent the weekend with when you were, you know, staying at your grandma's house for the weekend, and they're just some kid who lived on that street, and you played with them all day, every day for 2 days, and then maybe you never saw them again. But for that weekend, you were inseparable. And when you're a little kid, that weekend is a month. You know, your time, you know, the days are long, you know, and it's kind of about that. It's about, you know, how your best friend in 3rd grade was no longer your best friend when 4th grade started, and moving on down the line. Your high school friends were no longer your friends when you went to college. You know, you promised, you thought you were going to be in touch forever, but that's just not how life works out, you know? And it's because the world changes you. But you have to let it change you. It doesn't happen just automatically. You can struggle and work very hard to make sure that this world doesn't change you. And that's where you get rooted in, you know, whatever it was, or bogged down in whatever it was. But, you know, for me, Moonlight is about that one moment in time where you were able to just let go and just be what you were for that one moment without getting all caught up in what it meant.
So letting go and being in the moment and accepting that. Yeah. Not trying to overthink it, not trying to figure out why it is what it is, just being in the moment.
Yes, and I spend a lot of my time overanalyzing everything to death. You know, a lot of my struggles have come, you know, I was, you know, and I don't mind talking about this, but, you know, I was one of the first Ritalin kids, you know. I lost people, you know, in car accidents when I was in high school, and, you know, drunk driving accidents and, you know, things like that. And, you know, and this isn't about that.
No,
it's about loss, and that's why I said, you know, it's about reasonable loss. It's, you know, that's that reasonable loss, losing someone that you love in a drunk driving accident. You know, that's, you know, losing a loved one. That's not what this is about. This is about remembering a moment in time. You know, playing games outside with your friends. You know, and these were people that you thought you were going to be with forever.
Right.
Because it all made sense.
Yeah, it all
and then
flowed.
One day, it all just changed, you know, whether they got a girlfriend, whether you moved. You know, this particular story talks about when someone moved, but that's what it's about. You know, it's about laughing and running in the moonlight.
That's awesome, man. So I'm looking forward to hearing it.
Absolutely.
We're glad to have you on the show.
Yeah.
So
the COVID fist pump.
Yeah, exactly. Michael Kaltofen, everybody.